Hello everyone out there. I decided one of my 2020 projects would be to make a tent. And so I thought I'd share that with you. I only really found one other relatively good video out there on YouTube about this type of build. So maybe this can add to the collection of them. Really super happy with this project. It turned out, exactly the way I wanted. When I started it out, I thought, well, this is a pretty daunting build. But hey, I was up for the challenge to see what I could do, and thought I'd share that with you. There's about 4 or 5 reasons why I wanted to build my own tent. So what are they? One is that I don't really like what's on the market today. It's and primarily for 3 reasons. Space inside the tent, they're really tight on their sizing to get the weight down. I wanted to comfortably fit 3 people, a dog, a small dog I bring along, as well as gear packs, clothing packs mostly, to keep them out of the rain and comfortable for the weeks that I'm out. And it's really uncomfortable sleeping when your feet are struggling against a pack. It's just doesn't give you a comfortable night's sleep. The second thing would be tent fly overhang for those rainy times. It's just it's so important to push that rain as far away from the tent as you can, and it keeps you much drier. So, and the third one was that I wanted oversized vestibules. So most vestibules, or a lot of vestibules, especially on the cheap tents, they don't even have a vestibule that overhangs the body of your tent. For the and that's even a struggle with the more expensive tents as well. So important to have that fly overhang as well as the larger vestibules. So I guess, of course, I wanted to keep the weight as light as I possibly could, and for an oversized 3-man tent, I got it down to 5 pounds with the poles, pegs, everything. So I'm pretty happy with that. From a cost perspective, I didn't really want to spend between $700 and $1,000 on a super light tent that had the features that I wanted. So, and I currently have 2 tents, probably in the $300 to $400 range, $500 maybe tops. They weigh in at 10 pounds and 12 pounds. In this case, the material cost me $350 and my own effort. So, and secondly, and lastly, rather, it's all about the condensation. A lot of single wall tents have condensation issues that a lot of people complain about. So I really wanted to make sure that I had a lot of really good control on eliminating that condensation issue. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, what's my experience level? Well, I've been camping, interior portaging for about 30 plus years. Normally I go for extended periods, so I take between a week and 2 weeks trips going in the interior. I stopped car camping long ago, so I can't carry an unlimited amount of gear. Got to keep that weight down. I live in Toronto, so my go-to places are Algonquin Park, Killarney, Temagami. So from a design perspective, I spent a lot of time looking at designs and trying to figure out what was a more achievable design for someone who's a medium level sewing capabilities, as well as something that can be done a little more easily at home. Obviously, the complex contours and whatnot just isn't going to happen in a home build. So I chose an A-line style tent since it's got easy transitions and easy fabric shapes. I chose to use a 2 vertical pole design, 1 on each end, with a floor space of 76 inches by 100 inches, which is almost 2 meters wide by 2.5 meters long. comfortably fits 3 people, 3 adult sleepers, with more than 2 feet at the end for clothes and gear. I also put 2 double doors, 1 on each end. And I bought a really nice thick waterproof fabric for the floor. So no need for additional footprint. And my vestibules reach out at 3 feet from my door. So I used a 1.1 ounce sill poly for the fly and vestibules, and 1.6 Hyper D PU 4000 for the floor. And both fabrics are wonderful to work with. Some people were worried that they were a little slippery to work with, but I didn't find that to be the case. So where did I get my supplies? I live in Canada, so I found a Canadian website, Hoffman's Outdoor Gear Supply. They sell all the products that you could possibly want. And you're probably wondering how long this took me. So I did keep track of it on a daily basis. I wanted to know how long it took me. I'm going to say it took me like upwards of 40 hours in design. Once that design was done, all the sewing and whatnot took me a total of 100 hours. Since it was my first time, you have a lot of things to sort out. I took the tent outside a lot of times, put it up so that I could measure exactly where my next pieces needed to fit. I made sample mock doors, mock zippers, and all that kind of stuff. So those things did take me a little bit longer. So it depends on whether you're familiar with what you're doing and how confident you are in doing them. So I completed in over 6 months. I basically worked for the month of December over the Christmas holidays, so basically 2 or 3 weeks there. And then I wanted to go on a camping trip in June, so I wanted to finish it up for then. So I think I started in May again and did it in June as well. So how easy was it? Well, I would say that the fly, the floor, and the vestibules were very easy. It's the joining it together which is the hardest. The mesh doors, that's the most difficult when you're working with a single wall tent. You've got to actually make an inner product, and it is a little more difficult. But I did it without any real showstoppers along the way. So I'm pretty happy with that. For stitching, I only use 3 types of stitching. Flat-felled seams, FELLED, really important for those parts where you need some really super strong joins. I bought the foot for a flat-felled seam. It just wouldn't work on this kind of slippery material, so I had to do it another way, and so I did accomplish that. And I used that approach for flat-felled seams, and then I used a single stitch, and I used a double rolled hem, and I'll show you that in the video later. Nothing too complex, really simple, straight stitches. Anyone can do them, and so it's pretty easy to apply. So I was thinking of making a short version of this and a long version of this. I don't know whether I'll do that. I might just make one longer one and you can fast forward through it. I hope this really gives you a good idea of how to do it, and maybe you'll get up the gumption to make your own tent as well. And the next project I'm thinking of doing is maybe a one-man tent for those trips when I go on my own. Thanks for watching, and I hope me sharing this with you helped you out in some small way. Hi. So I wanted to wait. I've finished the tent, and I wanted to wait until I had tried it in the wilderness for quite a while before I filmed the final filming of it. And so basically I've used it in Temagami portaging trip for this is our 8th day, and so I think that it's worked out excellently for us. It is it's been through rain and through very hot days, nights, and also so it's been through a really hard driving rain, as well as normal nights, trying to fit into a smaller campsites. And so on portaging trips you definitely don't get the ideal setup scenarios a lot of the times. Anyway, it survived. It's worked really, really well. I can control the condensation without any issue, and it's really kept out the bugs and kept us comfortable at night. As you know, I made basically a D door. It worked out really well, so I'm very happy with it. The air pockets on the side, on both sides, to reduce the condensation really well. And if I do in order to reduce the condensation, or eliminate it, actually, the last 2 nights I've completely eliminated it, on 2 of the sides, usually in the middle, but in this setup I can't do it in the middle on this side. I just put a little stick there and just raise it up, to allow additional airflow, even with the vestibules down. It eliminates the condensation 100%. My first 2 nights I didn't do that. First 4 nights, and I had condensation every day. And so, and I had the vestibules closed at night. So, I wasn't really expecting rain on most of those nights, except for one, when we had a thunderstorm. But in effect, I closed the vestibules anyways, and I guess that's what helped contain or keep the condensation in. But for a single walled tent, 4.5 pounds, a 3-man size, it has a big footprint, and finding portage interior campsites that can handle this size of footprint is a little bit challenging. But for instance, the last 2 nights we were in places that had a smaller area, still set up fine. I don't care. I had to use rocks on some sides to keep to tie off the outer sides and whatnot. Of course, I love the fact that one of the main reasons I built it was because I'm unsatisfied with store-bought tents, because they have basically 0 overlap between the tent and the fly. So I have here, 20 inches almost, between the edge of the tent and the exterior. So I have a lot of space there, and I, that was one of the main wins that I wanted, and I got. So I started with some rough drafts, diagrams, measurements, trying to figure out which shape and size I wanted. I decided to go with an A-line tent. And so I started drawing rough pictures and seeing how the floor versus the mesh versus the roof tarp area would work, and whether or not I could, what would I put where. So I'm doing a single piece tent. Will all be sewed together. I don't know how challenging it will be by the end of the day, but
And I started measuring out, making models, things like that. Here's my sizing for my vestibule. Trying to see what sizes of fabric to order based on, cutouts of each vestibule piece. And I made some mock-ups and stuff. And so then once I finished the rough sketching, then I started making some really detailed plans based on trying to figure out what size of fabric to get. The more times I was ordering fabric, the more it was going to cost me. And then yesterday, now that I have all my supplies, so I went to Hoffman's Outdoor Gear Supply online, and I bought some mesh, some sill poly for the roof. They only some Hyper D 300, PU 4000, very waterproof for the floor. Some shock cord, some BCD rings, gross grain, some of this Gutermann thread, which is really good quality thread, line locks, which are really cool, D-rings, and big long zipper to put zippers in the mesh as well as the fly. So yesterday, I basically mapped out only the bottom floor. And you can see I'm trying to figure out how much of a, I did a 7-inch, I'm doing a 7-inch bathtub floor. So I'm making it, the raw material is 91 inches long. So basically I bought 91 times 2 in full length. And it's 58 inches wide. So basically that gives me 49 inches with a 1-inch seam down the middle, and then the 7-inch bathtub floor on the side and on top and on the bottom. And then, so I'll join these two pieces together through the mill here. Anyway, so I thought I would give it a try. I did some experimental sewing on some seams here, just to experiment with this fabric, which is the sill nylon. It's very, very slippery, but that doesn't create a problem with your sewing. So it's this is the fabric that I bought for the floor. So it's the 4000 PU D Hyper D. So I'll use this shiny surface as my touching, what's going to be touching the ground. It's PU rated for 4000, so it keep out the rain, the water, and this is slightly textured, which is nicer for the inside of your tent. So this is 5 yards. So I just cut it in half right now. So this will be my 91 inches, or it'll be the width of the tent from there to there will be the width. So I've laid out my bathtub floor. I've got 5 meters of floor, and I'm going to sew a center line down the middle. I figured that was the best location for it as to the different alternatives. And so now I'm going to start making my main seam down the middle. And I've passed through a number of little gross grain ribbons to be hooks for
my plan where the bathtub floor is going to be held up vertically with what's it called, the elastic cord, and tied to the tarp, the fly, as a way of keeping the bathtub floor vertical. I experimented with flat felled seams. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that too well, so I'll do a very slight variation of that that I just did some samples of, and it should work out okay. Here I'm making my initial pass on the join in the middle, down the middle. And for my second stitch, to merge this together, I'm going to do a double roll. So I'm going to roll it once, roll it twice, pin it in place, and then work down throughout the rest of the seam. And now I'm doing my rolled hem stitch. So I'm running the thread, just doing the sewing close to the edge here, and then I'll do a third one, and that's pretty close to a felled seam. Okay, now I'm doing my last stitch on the the third one. So there was a flap here sticking up. Once you finish sewing two, there's a flap sticking up. And so now I'm going to sew that down so it's nice and neat and tidy. And we're going to put in 2 loops to hold up the bathtub floor on the outside of the tent. So for the bathtub floor, I'm just finishing off the outer edge. So just doing a rolling it twice around to the outside. This will be where the mesh attaches, and so just doing a single stitch along the outer edge. The other thing that we needed to do was figure out how the bathtub floor is going to stay vertical. So in effect, we took a piece of plastic from a lid that we had for a bucket or whatever, and cut it into 8-inch strips. And it's pliable, but also sturdy enough. So here, what I did was just added an extra piece of fabric, sewed around the edges of the fabric, just by itself, to make a I don't know, a 1.5-inch rectangle by 8 inches. And then I sewed up the top and the side and the bottom side, and then I inserted the piece of plastic. And now, when we attach the shock cord, it actually holds up really nicely in order to make it stand. Once we have the tent in the up position, this will be providing the pressure, and it'll make the bathtub floor stand up the 7 inches that I had planned. So really cool. I was trying to figure out how to do this, and this was an awesome solution. So worked perfectly. All right, so we're just doing the last hem around the bathtub floor,
and I've double rolled it, which means you fold the outer edge the first time and then you fold it a second time and then you pin it. So I pinned it about 8 inches apart, and then you just pull the fabric taut and sew away, pulling it gently as you go. Okay, so I had to devise a way of putting the tent pole into the bathtub floor to hold it vertical and to support the one side of the A line of the tent. So I have made these two pieces. I found this orange gross grain, fairly sturdy. And then I also found from the old tent that I'm not going to be using anymore, these support clips clipped onto this tent pole to attach it to the tent. So what I did was I created this. I just sewed this onto the bathtub floor like this, so that it's not going to touch the bathtub floor. It's going to be touching the ground. And sewed this in place on the side 7 inches high, and then I sewed this piece of gross grain fabric that's holding this clip, and voila. So that'll hold it vertically and hold the bathtub floor up in order to support the bathtub in position. Okay, so let's get it sewed on here. Put my pin backwards. It's going to be a bit thicker, so it's going to be a bit harder to get it going. Right. And just since the fabric is easy to work with, I'll just put it in reverse and go backwards to get this part done. Oop. She ain't going. I'm off target. All right, let's fix that. It's all trial and error. Okay, that's a terrible sewing job, but I never said that I was a good sewer. Oh, Jesus. Okay, that'll still work. You know what? It doesn't always have to look pretty, but get the job done. Okay, so I wanted to, the next thing I needed to figure out was the boot. So each corner, how is the boot gonna look? So what I did was set it out on the ground and figured out, okay, so I want a patch on the corner so that it's much sturdier. Obviously we want 2 loops so that we can tie those out to the fly, and it will hold it vertical. And also I wanted to put a piece of plastic in there to keep it firm and vertical. So I did up a template where basically here's the corner of the material, marking off a 7.5 inch border, which is where I want my boot to the height of my boot, 7.5 inches, with the hemming around the edges. Now I wanted a patch, and I've used all my material, so I cut out, and I didn't want extra material inside the boot, so therefore I cut out the corner 4.5 inches. Here's my 2 loops, and then you sew up a hem around the newly cut area, and then you fold it over, and you sew it on the inside. Do up a line of thread, and then sew on your boot first so it's flat, and then from there you're sewing up a straight line across this vertical to make the 90 degrees, and you're all set. So now that I've done my template, I'll take a few videos along the way. Okay, so here's my template. I've got a mark each corner, mark each side. I'm going to cut it along this line. So now draw out each piece where I'm going to cut it and sew. And just need this measurement here. So 4 3/4, 4 3/4. Double check the measurement. All right. Backwards. Should be like this. Always think before you cut. Very funny. It's actually going to be this way, because of course I need this corner for the patch. This fabric marker, crayon I guess you call it, certainly comes in handy. It's perfect for this type of stuff. Okay, so we're cutting out our corner. And I cut it through a tiny bit extra so that when I fold it over and do my hem, then it will let me fold it. So just a tiny little extra cut. Okay, and here's my patch, and I'll just do a single roll hem on these because I'll be sewing it up onto the cloth to make my extra support for the corner. Extra sturdy. Okay. Okay, now you just have to draw out on the bottom. You want your patch on the bottom. So I put my template down and decided on where the patch needs to go. Mark it and mark it, draw it in, and that's 7 3/4. Oh, 7 1/2. Seven and a half. Okay, so now we know where the patch needs to go, and I figure the best placement is with an overlap of what I think we should overlap it by at least half. So this is the center point, should be hanging over by that much at a diagonal. So that's where we'll pin it in. Don't need to be too accurate on this. It will do its job no matter what. Okay, let's sew on that patch here. I want the stitching to be pretty much at the outside, so it doesn't bunch. And around we go. Okay, so this is what it looks like once, this is the inside, upside of the floor. And basically, once you've cut off the middle area, the middle square, now you've got your line down here which says that that's where I'm going to sew. And this part is going to end up in the inside of the boot, of the corner. And so, of course, we need to add the 2 loops, which I've added underneath. So I've added one at the top and one at the bottom. And now we are just going to draw, sew a straight line, 2 straight lines, up and down here, just for a little extra strength there. And then we'll place our plastic inside here, which will add a little bit more firmness. So that's it, that's the next step. Okay, and here I'm just going to insert this piece of plastic to get a little bit of sturdiness, some strength in each corner and each side, so that the bathtub floor edge stands vertically in a good way. I saw this in one of my brother's tents that he'd purchased, which is a great idea. So slide that in there into the little pocket, and then I'll sew up this side first to get it contained. Then I'll sew up here just to put it in, to make its own little pocket. And then I'll just fold this piece like this and just sew it there, just to hold it down and make it look good. Okay.
Okay, hey, the bathtub floor is totally complete. I'm extremely happy, especially with this product. it's a great product to sew, to work with. So each corner has a stay, 2 loops, so that I can tie out shock cord from both of them to attach to the fly rather. And of course you saw my approach to the holding up the poles and connecting it with the flooring. And as well the side stays, just to give it some rigidity halfway through the wall, that will also be tied out with shock cord and attached to the fly over to the side, so it'll pull it out and up, which I think will work. So great news, and I didn't run into any issues or concerns along the way. So the experiment continues. I'll do the fly next, and I think the fly will be the easiest job of the 3. This was the medium difficulty. Fly will be the easiest. The mesh will be the hardest. And vestibules should be also pretty easy, as long as I have my isosceles triangles formulas working well. Which I think I do. Anyway, I will continue tomorrow. Okay, so now I'm making my fly. I'm making a fly that is 5 feet long on each side, and it's going to be the same length as the floor, plus a 4-inch overhang, plus 1.5 inch for the seams along each side. So basically it's going to be 8 feet long for the A. So then you've basically got 5 feet hanging down from each side. Or it's 6 feet, sorry, 6 feet wide on each side. So this is extra large 1.1 sil poly nylon. And so right now I'm just sewing my flat felled seam down to join the two. So the join will be running from front to back at the top middle joint, where the poles are supporting it. And so I've got my glossy side on the outside, so that'll be the facing upwards toward the sky. And so to sew it, I've got my 2 glossy sides pointing together, touching each other, and I'm sewing on the outside, where I'll sew my flat felled seam 3 lines with a double roll as a second one. So first of all, just a seam, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch seam, 1 straight line. Then I'll roll twice, so I'll do a double roll, and then I'll do one last joint, one last sewing to sew down the flap, in effect. And I will be putting little pieces of ribbon, cross-grain ribbon, in the middle once in a while, every foot or so, to provide for, if you want to hang something from the top middle, it's good to be able to run a rope through the middle of your top of your tent, so you can hang something if you really want to, a lamp or something small. Anyway, so I'll add those as I go, but right now I'm just going to start it. Okay, so here's my fly. I just finished doing the initial 2 steps of the flat felled seam to merge these 2 pieces together. And then I'll put a hem around the whole fly, all the way around. All right, so for the corner tie-outs on the fly, basically what we need to do is strengthen this piece. I tried attaching a loop just to the edging here, it's not nearly strong enough. So I took a diamond, a corner-shaped piece, put a seam on it, and then I'm just attaching that as well as a long piece of ribbon in order to really augment the strength. So sewing not only around the edges of the triangle, but also through the ribbon as well, all the way in, which really makes it nice and strong. So I'm creating the junction point on the fly, where I've got where the pole will rest in the middle of the fly at the top point of the A line 10. I'm just creating a point where the pole is going to fit into this grommet, or whatever you call it. And so what I did was I reinforced it with some thicker, with some poly D300 that I had left over from the floor. I just had a little tiny bit left. And so I've got two pieces of that because they're very thin, so I'm just going to sew them together in the formation of a make a fairly large rectangle to support, because this is basically going to be your stress point. So this will reinforce the fly because it's fairly thin material. Put on the black pieces, square or rectangle. And then because it's a pressure point, I'm adding this fairly thick material. I've already attached the ribbon that's going to hold the eye peg, and that'll slide into the pole and hold the. So I've already done one side. Now I'm doing the other side. Okay.
Okay, so I set it up outside. I couldn't do it inside. I don't have quite a big enough room, almost. And obviously the tent pegs make a huge difference in setup. Yeah, it's winter. I'm trying to do this as a winter project. So yesterday it went above 0, so managed to melt the snow, and now we're just trying to set it up and see the final measurements for the mesh, which is the hardest job. You want to install the mesh so that it's taut. Most of my plans worked with being able to use line locks for all the edging, all the around the fly, as well as the connection point between the boot or the bathtub floor and this. So I use line locks for each one, and seems to be working really well. The middle one is staying up better if I only tie it to the bottom with the shock cord. And so I'm going to attach a piece of mesh from the base along here to here. I'm going to slant it outwards so that if there's any dripping coming through that seam, when I attach it to the fly, at least the drip will fall on the outside of the tent rather than the inside. So if I move it maybe 3 inches in, attach it at the top 3 inches in, and attach it here on the bathtub floor. Let's take a look at the other side. There's it's quite obviously the vestibule would be the last step. Quite a bit of pressure on these poles. You can see the other pole bowing a little bit. But in effect, I might have to buy some sturdier poles, a little thicker gauge to support it. This morning I started putting in some little little things to hold your gear, your watches and phones and whatnot. And now I'm gonna get down to measuring. Anyway, I think when the vestibule is attached, I'm hoping that it will hold the ridge line more taut. This is just a tiny bit too loose. So I either have to figure that out. I have to figure that out somehow. But my poles are 50 inches tall right now. I was thinking of making, I lowered them by a little bit. But this is a good almost kneeling height. So I'm 5'10", so kneeling height is perfect for me, in the middle anyway. So that's what I'm doing today. So we've started on the mesh, and we have 2 large pieces of fabric. And so basically here's our design. I've remeasured it now that the rest of the tent is made, the floor and the fly. And in effect, I'm looking for, I have 12 feet of fabric to do the front face. And so in effect, we need to cut it to optimize on fabric. We need to cut 2 inverted pieces, and we need to measure our center points. Basically, measure our center points here so that we can cut the fabric along this path, and then we'll have 2 pieces that we can utilize. And the side pieces, I've just got 1 piece of fabric, and I'm just going to cut strips of it and join it in the middle to create a long piece along the I guess the side of the tent, both sides, to join the mesh to the fly all the way along the whole length, which is about 8 feet. So from here to here, from the width of the floor, we're 74 inches exactly. So, and then of course, because this side's going up at an angle for the drip point to be outside the floor, then I just need to create that sideways angle as well. And so let's get cutting. Okay, so we've laid out our mesh fabric, and we were going to measure the middle. Here we drew a spot where we can cut it down the middle, and so it's at an angle so that we can maximize on our fabric. This fabric is I think 58 wide by 12 feet long. So basically our widest point in any side is almost 7 feet, and the floor is 6 feet wide. So because we're going up at an angle on the edges to meet up with the fly, so there's a drip overhang here, then so we cross that off. I wanted to draw it all out because I don't want to cut it and then make an error. So this looks good. And then for the sides of the tent, which are about 8 feet long, I have a smaller piece, and so I watched online someone who was doing this, and they used tape to tape down the mesh because it is quite springy. So once you stretch it, which is obviously how you want it sewn, then it'll be a different size than if it's loose. So I cut off 1 piece. I cut off a 1 inch hem, an extra 1 inch on each hem, so that it, which it seems to be taking. So this sample one, I've put the pins in, and on one side just to see how much the hem was using, and in this piece, which I'd already done quite a while ago, we'll marry up with that, and then it'll be
long stretch, because I don't have a long stretch of fabric here. So,
all right, so I pinned out my mesh fabric. I think this is a pretty simple material to sew on. So no need for back stitching at this point. Just a single seam would be enough for now, and then as we fold up the edges and the sides, then it'll reinforce the ends. I just stretch it a little more than you might other fabric, I guess. All right, and that's really all we're gonna do is hem each side and then marry it up to the other one that we made.
okay, so I have sewn my 8-foot length of side mesh, and so I've laid it out. So I sewed up this end as well as both sides, as well as the join between the two different pieces of fabric, because I didn't have the 8-foot length. And now, of course, it's two 6-foot lengths, I think, or thereabouts. So now I need to measure exactly how much I need, and so I've laid it out with tape to stretch it to a reasonable amount, and then drawn my line as to the exact distance that I wanted. And I wanted 1 inch, 1 inch extra, so it wraps around the end of each side, so that it can be sewn onto the door panel of the mesh fairly easily. So that's my strategy right now. Okay, so we went through the process of pinning the mesh onto the boot on the sides, and then we sewed it, and we did a straight stitch 3 times along the merge between the boot, the floor, and the mesh fabric. On this side, obviously, we're going to sew that onto the fly as our next step. And as you can see here, I don't know if you can see that, but basically on the corner I overlapped it by 1/2 inch, so this end of mesh comes around, and when we put the door on, we will sew the door mesh onto this overlapping piece by the size of the hem. And just starting to do this side, and so now I'll place pins about every 4 inches about, to make sure, because it's very the two are very slippery material against each other. So in this case, I'm going to put the pins closer together so that it holds it steady, and as I sew it, it will create a nice finished project. Hey, Harley, how you doing? Yeah. Okay. And you too, Hunter. Hey? Yeah. All right, so that's our next step. So now I've finished sewing on the mesh along the long edge of the tent, and sewed it onto the floor. Now I'm going to sew it onto the fly. So basically what I did was I set it up outside, and then I figured out exactly where I wanted the mesh to join with the fly, and marked it off. Made them even on both sides. As you can see, my first line was 1 inch different on this side, and then I figured out that I needed to be 1 more inch further out. And so now I'm going to pin them together, and I'll work on this side, and then I'll work on the other side. So the easiest way I've found to do this is to first of all, lay out your fly with weights on it. As you can see, I'm using my trusty cans of paint and kitchen equipment. So lay it out, stretch out the fly, and then lay out the mesh that's attached to the floor upside down, both of them upside down. And then what I did was I measured both of them carefully, drew out a line across the fly of where I want to attach it, which in this case is a 17-inch overhang, which was one of my major goals, to stop it from, to keep the rain farther away from the tent. And basically I wanted to go with a 5-inch overhang prior to the vestibule being attached. And then marking the middle, measuring the distance, dividing it by 2, putting a mark in the middle, both on the mesh as well as the fly. Dividing that by 2, putting another mark halfway through, or a quarter of the way through. And then that way, you start pinning in the middle, and then you attach at the, sorry for the dogs, and then you attach at the quarter point and the end point, and then you pin in between. Since the mesh is slightly springier than the fly, then that would equate them. A normal evening at my house. All right, so that's the pinning approach I take. My first attempt on the other side to attach the floor was a little bit more challenging, but as I went, I learned that this would be a better approach to do it. So that's the way I accomplished the other side. All right, so just doing the sewing for this side mesh, and so I mean basically the mesh is contracting more than the fly, so therefore putting the extra marks on both the mesh as well as the fly to match up all of the pin marks and match up different areas gives you a good guide along the way to see which one, whether you need to pull the mesh harder to try to stretch it a bit more while you're sewing it, or loosen it off a bit while you're sewing. So it's a bit of a battle, this particular first stitch, and I'm going to do 3 stitches, 3 different rows, just for additional strength. And I know it's going to put more holes in the fly, but I think from a strength perspective, considering the wind is flapping and all that in this area, it's probably better to put an extra stitch in. And keeping the fly straight or flat and not bound on top of each other is also definitely a challenge. So take your time. I'm only doing like 3 or 4 inches at a time, and then I stop and straighten it. So that's just for the first pass. The second pass and the third pass are much easier. Okay, and finish it up. A few times, and that's it. Now of course there's a lot of material in my that I'm handling right now, so I'm going to, instead of just turning around and flipping the material back the other direction, I'm going to actually feed it in the same direction I just did, so that I have all my material out on my desk and not try and squeeze it through this little tiny hole on the sewing machine. So I'll keep the bulk of the material on my left side. Okay, so now the next step is to create the doors. And so I've laid the fly upside down, and
obviously I'm going to join the mesh door to the side mesh, and here's the floor. So in effect, I've drawn a line from where the side mesh ended all the way up to the center point, the highest point of the A. It's about just a touch over 4 inches at this point, and just a touch over 5 inches down here at this point. So this is where I'll sew the top of the door, and so I just wanted to draw that line in there, and I'll do that for both sides, and then I'll go outside, put it up, and start cutting the mesh door to size a little bit better. I just want to get a better feeling for the exact angles and that kind of stuff. And then I'll put the zipper on the mesh first, and then I'll start sewing the door in, Okay, so I decided to put it up on the inside of the house. It's raining right now, so I just did a quick job. But I basically wanted to see how the side mesh had worked out, attaching the flooring to the side of the tent, and it worked out very well. Can't complain at all. So, okay, so set it up outside, and basically sizing the door, the mesh door. So I put the mesh on just by pinning it, and just to get a rough idea of the sizing, and pin it as tightly as I could, but it's not obviously going to be tight enough. So my wife suggested just to sew along the bottom first. So first of all, I'm going to put in the zipper. So I'm going to make a zipper that's kind of like a D shape, not a D shape, but a backward C or forward C. And then I will, once I've done that, I'm going to sew along the bottom, come outside, put it up again, and then I'll stretch all of the other surfaces and repin it, and then I'll have a better idea where to sew the last bits. Okay, so I'm just working on figuring out the zipper, which was a bit of a challenge in my head. So I was thinking of doing a circular one like this, but the zipper material, the coiled zipper, doesn't isn't able to go in such a tight corner or turn, smiley face. So instead, my wife suggested just to do what I've seen on another tent. It's not quite as good of a design. So I made a mock-up, just a mock-up door, and so it's basically just using 2 zippers instead of only 1. So basically opens up like that. It'll just fall through. I didn't want it falling flat on the ground, so the door, the meshing shouldn't be where you're stepping, obviously. So I've seen someone online who created that approach, but this one will open up and hang inwards from the top. So I just wanted to do a quick sample in order to, before I actually cut all my material and whatnot, and the zippers, and have to rebuy everything if I screwed up. So anyway, it worked pretty good. The inside is actually a little better looking, but since I want to sew the back of the zipper directly to the floor material, I need to do it from the back side. So
And then I just used some grow grain to reinforce the merges between the two separate pieces. In both cases, I'll use black, of course, when I get to the real tent. But this was just a good test, which made me feel a lot better. Always good to test it. Anyway.
So what I've done here is just laid out the door. This is the inside of the door. I put up the tent outside where the, just so I know exactly where the fly is expected to merge with the mesh, so that I would put the zipper in the right spot. Basically, this tape measure is delineating that mark, and so I've already sewn in the one vertical one, horizontal one rather, which is tied to the top of the floor boot, and then I have a more gradual sloping turn that will terminate, once I get to about here. Considering that we'll use one side of the tent to get in, meaning the pole's in the way, so there's no point in putting zipper on the other side. So anyway, I'm very satisfied with the mock door, so I'm gonna finish up this one and get that done today. So I've sewed on the outer edge, the longer edge of the zipper, pin it in place. Of course, it fits perfectly. I started sewing on the high end, on the high side, because otherwise the fabric would have been, otherwise the whole tent would have been pushing. I would have had to push it through the little tiny hole in the sewing machine. And so what happened at the end is that I'm now short. So obviously the mesh stretched out, and anyway. So now I have to unpick it all and redo it, and just a little learning lesson for me that leaving an extra full inch down here where you're trying to make a connection point, and to allow, you can always cut it off, which anyway, lots of work. It is the first thing that I've had to unstitch, so on the whole tent so far. I mean, maybe tiny little bits, but nothing like this. All right, so sewing on the outside of the outside edge of the zipper, and watched a few tutorials on it on YouTube, and so this is correcting my issue. I've now put a longer lead at the end so that I won't screw up again. I picked out all the zipper very carefully, and now we just gotta sew it back on. So of course, when you're applying the zipper, you don't do back and forth stitches until later on in the process. You want to get your zipper head in place and all that kind of stuff before you finish up that kind of thing. So I'm going to put a single stitch on both sides, and then I'm going to cut the fabric exactly in the middle, and then I'll sew a second inner stitch right beside, as close as possible to the actual coiled zipper. And just take my time here with the first stitch. It's always best. Okay, so I finished the door, finished the zipper, and now I wanted to measure it out, or to draw it out exactly, make it proportionately even on each side as to where I'm going to hem it, hem the fly, or the mesh rather, and then I'll just start hemming it. And I also wanted to make a copy of it, a precise measurement of it on paper, so I can use it for the second door. So here's what I was deeming as the most challenging part. This is basically, I have the zipper in, I roughed in the dimensions of the mesh in order to be taut, in order to see where I'm going to sew it on the fly. Then I just position or put on every half and quarter on the way up to the peak. So basically I stitched a holder position just maybe an inch long in 3 different places and at the peak of the fly. And then I put it up outside, and I saw that it was a little bit slack. So what I did was I just rolled the hem of the mesh one more time, and just did a quick hem on that, and that made it taut. And so now I am just finishing off this side of mesh, attaching it to the fly. And what I did again was I tacked it in the 3 places again, just with a stitch which was 1 inch long every quarter of a distance up to the peak on both sides. Put it up, made sure it was sufficient. Now I'll just, because it's very easy to get out of sync with this, because I've tacked it in 4 places, rather than using pins to put more holes in. I think it's a little better plan. So each section I'm going to do individually with the sewing job, or maybe I'll do the lower one individually, and then I'll be able to turn it around and do the rest of the way up to the peak in one go. So anyway, this is the tricky part, and most patient. You have to be patient and keep trying it again and again and again until you get it right. And obviously I've marked on my fly exactly where I want the mesh to attach. Okay, now so I'm on my second door. I cut the fabric based on the pattern from the other one. So the first door took me quite a long time to do. I was doing samples and things like that. This one should be much, much quicker. So I had my mesh cut to size, which again is sewed from the inside of the tent for the first pass. So I sewed on the very, very outside of each, I'm sure if you can see that, of the zipper onto the fabric. And then now I'm sewing from the outside for the second pass, which is going to be closer to the zip head, or to the actual coil zipper. And so what I've done is I've sliced after I ran my first 2 stitches on the very outer edge of the zipper, then I took my scissors and sliced down the path of the zipper from the outside, exposing the coil zipper path. And now I'm going to sew quite close to the coil zipper as my second pass. And once you've cut the fabric in the middle, obviously there's hanging fabric. So on the lower portion, it was easy for me to, because this is only a number 3 zipper, it's quite a small zipper. I think I would suggest a number 5 zipper rather than a number 3 zipper, but it is lighter. But I don't think the weight on the zipper is a big deal. To make it look nice, you can actually, from the center, fold the fabric underneath, and then when you sew the second one that's closer to the zipper, to the coil, you can finish that edge nicely. So that's what I'm going to do, is make my second pass on both sides of the zipper. And again, I have not sewed the ends of the zipper yet, so that then you can crack it open and
put the zipper head onto the zipper to finish that off. And let's put the zipper heads on. And it just takes a little bit of finicky with. Basically, I bought the zipper as a from roll, and because I wanted a very long length for the zipper on the doors as well as the zipper on the vestibules. So, of course, so you buy your zipper heads separately. And of course, in this case, well, all tents you'd want a double dongle on it to have it on both sides. So there we go. It's looking pretty nice. And then we'll put it didn't come with zipper stops for the ends, so I'm just going to use my my setting on the sewing machine that's number 1, I think, and it just sews a whole bunch of thread in one little spot, stays still, doesn't move, so that way it'll create a zipper stop from a larger amount of thread. So for the ends of each zipper on both ends, I decided to put a piece of grosgrain just to finish it off, make sure that the zipper cannot come back farther than we'd like to, and make it a little sturdier on both ends, the beginning and the end of it. So I've been making the vestibules now. Basically cutting out this brown fabric that I bought for the vestibule is olive fabric, is 58 wide, and I just bought 5 meters of it. And so basically I'm just optimizing the available fabric, cutting them into triangles on opposite sides. So, and then hemming one side with a short hem, 1-inch hem basically. And then on the other side, I'm adding an extra 4 inches for the flap that goes over top of the zipper. And so just sewing them is a fairly simple job. So it's, this is just sewing seams around the edges and then sewing the zipper down, joining them, and attaching it on the bottom of the fly. Fairly straightforward. Just need to do a bit of measuring and figure out what size and dimensions you want.